Welcome back to Around the 412. I'm Tyler. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Be sure to go follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, everywhere you can follow us. And also go subscribe to us on YouTube. We're going to try to keep growing that as we go along. And friendly reminder that it is year 5 of Rocking Around the 412. It's our Christmas fundraiser where the Smitty and I, along with all of you who can donate, try to help some less fortunate families that don't have the same circumstances that Smitty and I were able to have the fortune of growing up. And so what we do is you guys donate all the money, and we use every cent that gets donated to provide gifts, makeup, toys, electronics, like whatever you can think of, we will get it for the kids. Basically, we get them whatever they want. And then we also provide a gift card for the parents to provide a Christmas meal. But yeah, so if you want to go check that out, you can go to the pin tweet on our Twitter, and you can also go to GoFundMe.com directly and search Rocking Around the 412, and you can read all about it there.
Absolutely. And to kind of tie that in with something else, and I will once again have this in the bio. I mentioned last week, or Tyler mentioned last week, that there is another GoFundMe for my friend Dalton, who passed away. His daughter, to go towards her future. This thing is at I don't want to misspeak here because it just keeps growing like crazy. So I don't know what's going to be at by the time people watch or listen to this. I believe it was around 26,000 when I looked earlier today. I've kind of been monitoring this, but there's a GoFundMe set up for his 2-year-old daughter to go towards her future. And the way that it ties in, if you were wondering, I mentioned it tied in, she's going to be, we know, the first person that we're for sure taken care of with Rocking Around the 412. So her Christmas will be provided by those who donate. We also, as of the time of recording this, had a decent day today with donations. I know that I kind of started to pump it out more. A lot of people have been asking about it. That's on me for not doing as good of a job this year with advertising it and stuff. But I feel like this is kind of the time of year where it does ramp up to begin with, when we really start to get into football season and the fall weather and stuff like that. And people realize, oh man, it's only a couple months until Christmas. So this is kind of the time of year where it ramps up anyway. So you'll be seeing a lot more of it. We're going to keep throwing it in your face. But it's all for a good cause. So we're not just spamming you with stuff for no reason. So Rocking Around the 412 is going on. The Isla Keen Future Fund is also going on. So
it's
check out both of those
hair
things.
under 28,000, by the way, as a recording.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So it's gone
Great.
up.
Yeah, every time I go on there's a new donation. And the coolest thing about it, man, is like looking at the donators to see who is donating and seeing like basically my entire graduating class getting involved and stuff like that. But that just goes to show what I mentioned on here, how many people love Dalton and how close that he was with so many people. Like, regardless of what group that you were in throughout high school, you had a friend in Dalton. And yeah, so it's been really great to see so many people supporting his daughter and his family in what is the most difficult time in their lives. I would say on a bit happier matter, we can talk about some sports, but yeah, the Steelers, man. We're going to kick it off as we always do with adding some humor with Sarge's Steelers notes.
That'll be good.
But but I think that we need to start adding context to the game before we just jump into the notes, because I realized the last couple weeks I just jump into these things and people be like, I mean, you probably watched the game, but it's like, if you didn't, you have no clue where some of this stuff is coming from or what happened in the game itself. The Steelers get blown out in Buffalo 38-3 on Sunday. Now, neither of us picked the Steelers to win this game. We thought like maybe they would keep it close enough.
We picked them to cover, and yeah, we were way off.
Absolutely. As we just say, like, we thought that they'd win in Vegas, with them having the largest spread that they've ever had.
The Bills doubled the amount they needed to cover. Yeah. Over doubled.
I mean, there was very few positives to take away from this game, and we will get into them. But just on the surface, yeah, 38-3, the Steelers go up to Buffalo and lose. I think what was so frustrating to me, they're losing 10-3 at this point. They get a pick from Levi Wallace in the end zone, and then they go 3-and-out. The Steelers had a little bit of momentum there. You felt like if they can put a drive together, and they had put a drive together in their first drive, it just kind of stalled out in the red zone, as we've seen so often. But you feel like if they could have done that, I mean, they might have stayed in this football game. It could have been a little bit of a different story. Not that they would have won by any means, but it could have changed. I don't think that they would have lost by 35 points. Right. I think that was the drive to me that kind of everything just went downhill after that. But yeah, let's get into Sarge's Steelers notes, and then we can talk about it more. Where's this at? Actually, here it is. Bills game. All right. First drive went from having all the confidence in the world to wanting to not watch football.
I mean,
yeah,
it was blame them.
Yeah, they get into the red zone, and then it's like what usually happens. But I think what was so encouraging to me about what we saw in that first drive, specifically from Kenny Pickett, is 2 third down conversions. And they were like 3rd down and 8 as well, and maybe 3rd and 11 on the first one to Pickens. So it's not like, 3rd and short, they're getting a yard or two. Like they were converting 3rd down and long situations, which again, I don't want to keep harping on it because they've now made the switch. I don't have to like lobby for it to happen, but it's just something that wasn't happening when Mitch Trubisky was in there. So that was the difference to me. We saw it very early in this football game. How are we struggling so bad with catching the ball on special teams? Okay, so they make the switch from Gunner to Steven Sims, and I think that was everybody was calling for it. We were all happy about it. Steven Sims has an eye injury before the game even starts and can't field the first kickoff. So it has to be James Pierre, who hasn't done that since college. Maybe they gave him some opportunities in training camp or whatever, but it really didn't look like it because like Anthony McFarland was still in the picture at that point to do that. Anthony Miller was healthy. So like I don't know where James Pierre was on the pecking order in training camp, but it wasn't very high. So for him to be thrown into that situation, it's a shame for him, but it is something he's done in the past. So I can't like say, what is Tomlin doing? Just throwing some random guy out there. James Pierre did this in college at least, but unfortunate for sure.
Yeah. The only, I guess, benefit of the doubt per se that I could give him is maybe he just wasn't, because that was a short kick. And I'm assuming that the wind probably had to do with that. So maybe he just wasn't expecting something like that to happen, but still, I mean, you're an NFL player. You should catch that ball.
Yeah. About 85% of teams who block a kick win the game. Hopefully Lady Luck is on our side. Yeah, the Steelers obviously fell to the 15% of that because they did block a field goal attempt of the Bills. They obviously did not win the football game. But what a weird start to this game. I mean, taking into consideration what we just said about the kickoff fumble, a 98-yard touchdown for the Bills right away. Then that happens, and then the Steelers block a field goal. Boswell misses a couple, kicking into swirling winds, so it's like hard to blame him. Just a very weird game as well. Pickens throwing dudes to the ground will always be funny. Yeah, like so I'm sure you've seen the clips, but like right at the line of scrimmage, he'll just like push a guy over, and it's even funnier when it's not a run play and he ends up like running a route on it. I mean, it's an interesting way to get open. It's you don't really see it very often. But the dude is a bully, and he might already be there. And this isn't saying much, very low bar. He's probably already their best blocking receiver.
Yeah, for sure. He's got to be.
Won't show up on the stat sheet, but Kenny helping up Najee after a run is nice to see. Yeah, we're gonna talk about Najee when we really give our thoughts more. At least me. I don't know what you have to say on it, but I know that I have a lot to say when it comes to Najee Harris so far this season. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot.
I know
of
the run he's talking about. I remember seeing Kenny pick him up. But
yeah, there's a lot of different things that Kenny does that are just like you just like to see from a first year guy that
he's a leader already.
Yeah, like going back to last year, this is stuff that we wouldn't even see from the offensive line to Ben, an 18-year veteran in the NFL helping him up.
That's true.
Kenny's pocket presence seems to be very high, able to throw the ball with defenders in his face. Again, he doesn't
something
collapse
he has
the
and Mitch didn't.
Yeah, he doesn't collapse the pocket on himself, and even when there are people right in his face, he's able to somehow see through that and keep the pocket as clean as possible. He doesn't force pressure on himself that's not there.
He's a quarterback that's not going to scramble when he doesn't need to. He can feel like he has a cleanish pocket, and even if it's collapsing, if he can make a play, he's going to stay there.
I am not a fan of having a quarterback roll to the weak side and throw. It looks very awkward. Yeah, he had a completion, I want to say to Fryarmuth, and that's happened a couple times. Like that also happened in the Jets game. And yeah, because you have to like come across your body, you're throwing at a different angle. It does look weird, but at the same time, I mean, if you're always rolling to one side, it's kind of what we were talking about with Kenny in college and Mitch historically. You're cutting off half the field. So like if he's going to do it from time to time, I think it's a benefit because you're keeping the defense on their toes a little bit. But yeah, it obviously,
And you were just talking
makes
about completions. It's not like we're talking about incomplete passes.
right. Yeah. We are down 14. Why are we trying to establish the run right now? Yeah, I mean,
establishing the run to me is such a myth. I mean, having played football, I understand the idea around, okay, if you can establish a run, it will open up the pass. But sometimes, and this is also me like watching, I'll relate this to BYU as well, because they struggle to run sometimes too. Sometimes if you're passing well and you can't run the ball, you just need to give it up. And you just need to do what's moving the ball, and that's throwing the football. I understand the philosophy of wanting to establish the run, and I think so many coaches get caught up into that they need to be able to get that going on the ground. And ideally, you want to be able to, but if it is just flat out not working, you just need to say screw it and throw the football, because you're just wasting downs at that point if you're going to keep going back to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going run, pass literally every drive, again, it kind of goes back to the predictability of the offense. It's going to be very easy to stop. Teams are just stack the box first and second down. I mean, we've seen it for how long now. You have to be willing to throw the ball on first down, second down. In any situation, you got to be able to throw the ball. I think on the reverse side of that, you kind of have to be able to run the ball in scenarios where it's typically not a run play either. Like that's how you have a balanced offense. By the way, just because it's on my mind and I don't know if I'll remember to say it later if I don't say it now, Kenny Pickett, and I understand the score was what it was, so like not surprising, I guess. 52 attempts in his first start. I would not have thought that was going to be the case. I don't think the Steelers are necessarily happy that was the case, but that definitely jumped off the page to me.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I listened to a TikTok that said like pretty much any quarterback that throws for 50 or more attempts has a losing record, and the only one that doesn't is Tom Brady. Like I think they said like Ben was like 4-11 when he has to throw 50 plus times.
Yeah.
So I mean, I wouldn't have expected that either, but the way that they were running the ball, especially with Najee, it just wasn't working.
It gets so frustrating seeing this team miss open field tackles. Yeah, I mean, listen though, like I'm not saying I don't know what the percentage is. I think this is one of those things that we feel like watching the Steelers is just the Steelers thing. I think like league wide open field tackling is very tough, obviously. I mean, you got to give credit to the guy with the football as well here in this situation. But I mean, I definitely see your point. To me, it's not even the open field stuff, like missed tackles at the line of scrimmage when there's multiple guys there, or the missed tackles that I'm looking at. If a guy like forces a missed tackle one-on-one in the open field, I mean, it is what it is. Again, you kind of got to tip your cap to the offensive player at times here too.
Yeah. Yeah, the tackles that drive me nuts is whenever you hit the guy at the line of scrimmage, but he either fights for an extra 3 or 4 yards, or he just bounces off that tackle and keeps running. Like arm tackles and ankle tackles that are just super weak. That's the most frustrating part to me watching it, is like you have plays where the guy should only get like a 1 yard gain, and it turns into like a 4 or 5 yard gain because you can't make the initial contact and keep him on the ground or get him to the ground when you first hit him.
Bob Spillane's the best defensive play was when a pass hit him in the leg when his back was turned. Yeah, he was running down the field in the end zone with a tight end that had him beat. I mean, this might have been one of Josh Allen's like 3 bad throws on the entire day. And yeah, he just hit Spillane in the back of the leg as he's in the end zone. This is so frustrating because we kind of saw it come to life again. I mean, there was a time where Spillane was the closest defender on Stephon Diggs. There was that play, obviously, where he gets beat, and you're just kind of fortunate that Josh Allen doesn't have a little bit more arc on the ball and get it over his head. But I'll keep saying it until it's not the case. I really don't see how Spillane is the team's best option as the dime linebacker. And we continue to see it. I understand, like, it's not going to be Devin Bush, but, like, I mean, give Miles Jack a shot. I understand this is his first year in the system. Maybe he's not completely, fully up to speed yet, but I don't know. Like, I think he is their best shot at getting something in form of coverage from a linebacker.
I just don't think Robert Spillane should be in any coverage. I don't think he has the athletic capability to keep up with some of these offensive players. Simple.
This just goes to show how bad things got in this game. Why do we have a player wearing 16 in the secondary? Yeah, that was Josh Jackson called up from the practice squad.
Yeah, literally everybody on Twitter and like putting in the car because we were driving back from Vegas at that watching the game. Like, who is this guy? I have no idea who's in the secondary right now.
I tweeted, "Is that Zach Celedonia in coverage right now?" Like, first off, I didn't realize that was Josh Jackson. I didn't know what number he was wearing. And immediately Josh Allen takes advantage of him hitting Khalil Shakir down to like the 5-yard line, the first play that he's in coverage. I think he ended up recovering a fumble in the end zone towards the end of the game, though, Josh Jackson. But yeah, why is he wearing number 16? I mean, that just we have, at least me, I have the theory, look good, play good, pay good, live good, die good. But like 16 in the secondary, you're not looking good. So the rest of that just becomes null and void.
Yeah. I remember harping on whenever I thought Minka should have went back to 29 instead of 39 at safety, but then seeing him at 16, I'm like, that's ugly. And part of it's just even funnier that nobody knew who that even was. Not only did we dislike the number, just no one had a clue who you were, dude.
I feel like I can skip this next one because it revolves around linebackers covering receivers. Kind of already touched on that. I wonder why the Haywards don't stand next to each other on the sidelines. I feel like I've seen them sitting on the bench at times together, but they're also
one's an offensive player, one's a defensive player. They typically aren't together on the sideline.
Yeah. Yeah, and if the offense is on the field and Hayward is not, like, he's not obviously in for a ton of offensive snaps, but he kind of always has to be ready. So he's probably standing by Tomlin and the staff when the offense is on. And he's going to have to be on Sunday, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Not only is kicking those field goals useless for the score, it's also hurting Boswell's career average. Got to look out for your guys. Yeah.
Hey,
again,
I respect that.
Wins.
You knew what that win was doing, and you're having me kick it anyway. But that was driving me nuts. Like, you're down by, how much was it in the second quarter? 21 in the second quarter.
Yeah.
And you're kicking a field goal. First off, that to me, you're already accepting defeat in the second quarter if you're kicking a field goal down 21. And then in the fourth quarter, again, what's the use? You're down 35. I don't get it. There was no point to be kicking either of those field goals. So yeah, you did hurt Boswell's average, but to me, all the way in the second quarter, Tomlin was just saying we're going to lose this game.
Maybe we are just so far out of the loop on what putting points on the board does for a locker room, but from the actual perspective of them staying in that football game, it would have done nothing. So I, again, don't get it. Something we can talk way more about, but I'm glad to see we're all on the same page with it. What's frustrating about that game is Kenny looked good. 3 points doesn't show that the offense mostly looked decent. Defense just stinks. So as far as the offense looking decent, I think, like, and I tweeted this, like, it's such a hard evaluation for how Kenny Pickett played in his first start, because the coaches obviously did him no favors with circumstances like we're talking about in that situation. But when you say the offense looks decent, I don't know that I can agree with that, just because the playmakers weren't making plays.
I would say some of his receivers weren't doing him any favors either.
Yeah, listen, I want to talk about Diontae Johnson. I want to talk about a lot of players at length when we really start to give our thoughts. Everybody knows how I feel about Deontay Johnson. I'm the biggest Deontay Johnson fan in the world. I think he deserved the payday that he got. That's why I think the argument could be made that I'm more disappointed than anybody with what we've seen to start this season. But we'll talk about that more. Kenny looked good. I thought the offensive line was okay. In pass protection, especially, not necessarily in the run game, although a certain running back did look much better than the other running back. But like, I don't know that I can say the offense as a whole looked very good.
No, I don't think so. I think specifically Kenny himself looked good to me. And that's what I'm going to be watching for going forward with the rest of the season. Not that I want to give up this early in the season, but to me, every game, at least offensively, is going to be watching Kenny Pickett's progression. I honestly don't really care about much else besides that.
I have never seen a defense, and this is the last one, look so lost without one player. Give TJ Defensive Player of the Year at this point, just by how the team looks without him.
Hey,
Yeah,
put some respect on Terrell Edmonds back though. That's not just one player, two players.
I literally have that as a topic. But as far as TJ goes, I don't know how many times that I'm gonna have to say this in consecutive weeks, but it's insane to me that you're talking about a top 5 to 7 defense when TJ Watt's on the field and a bottom 5 to 7 defense when he's off the field. I mean, they generate no pressure. Cam Hayward hasn't had a pressure since the first game. Alex Highsmith, who's got 5.5 sacks on the year, that's great. 18 pressures on the season. He didn't have a single one against Buffalo. I mean, they had 5 pressures in total. Josh Allen was only pressured on, I think, 11% of his dropbacks. It was like the 3rd lowest total in the NFL. It's just, I mean, that's obviously against anybody. That's not a recipe for success. When you're talking about Josh Allen, who's playing the level of football that he is, if you're starting a franchise right now, he's the 1st or 2nd pick. That's obviously not going to work. And they don't have the secondary to support that lack of pass rush. It's the way that the Steelers have decided to build their team. And you're seeing the flaws in doing so when TJ Watt isn't out there. They've never really prioritized corner. That's why, I understand that everybody's knock on the team is going to be the way that they draft and develop corners. But, even I think it's a testament to what they did this offseason. Like Akella Witherspoon, he's fine. Levi Wallace, he's fine. Cam Sutton, he's fine. Like they're good players, but they've never really prioritized having that shutdown corner because they don't need to. When TJ Watt's on the field and you got Cam Hayward going, you got Alex Highsmith going, but TJ Watt is the one that makes literally every other aspect of that happen. When he's not there, everything falls apart. And
I mean, they're what, 0-8 now without TJ in a game?
And also, I don't want to I'm by no means using this as an excuse, but for the Steelers, when it rains, it pours, because not only did they get their asses kicked on Sunday, the injuries continue to pile up. I mean, they went into this game pretty injured. They finished this game with 2 healthy corners. And one of them was a practice squad call-up in Josh Jackson. I mean, what are you supposed to do at that point? So not only have they been not good, obviously, they've been unbelievably injured up to this point too.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a tough situation to be in, and it would suck to watch this performance, and this performance probably wouldn't have been as bad against most teams, but they were also going against arguably the best team in football, so that's especially offensively. So that's another thing. It was they didn't have an easy week either.
Yeah. No, it was not good. But that was Sarge's Steelers notes. It's going to be really interesting. I was talking about this to Tyler right before we started the show. Next week's, because he's going to be at the game with me. Tom Brady's probably, please God, last time in Pittsburgh, bringing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here to Pittsburgh for Kenny Pickett's first home start with offensive introductions as well. The place is going to go wild. Regardless of the fact they're 1-4, this city is ready to see him be the starter, and I'm expecting still a very strong crowd on Sunday for this game. So now we can kind of give our thoughts on this game. I know that we were kind of chiming in here and there with Sarge's notes, but I want to start with kind of tying in the injury stuff the way that we ended last, but I'm going to start on the offensive side because I am really worried about Pat Fryarmuth. We're talking about his 3rd concussion in 2 years as a pro. It was something that he also dealt with at Penn State. It's tough because I don't know where you're at with this, but especially with the way that the league is handling concussions now and are going forward due to the way that Tua was handled. And I fully support it, by the way. This is not something to mess with when it comes to concussions. I think that you see post playing days, the ramifications of this stuff a lot of the times. And yeah, it can get pretty ugly. So 100%, I'm fully on board with whatever needs to happen here for Pat Fryarmuth to get back to 100%. But I don't want to roll him out yet. I would be very surprised if we see him on Sunday based off of what I just said. 3 concussions in 2 years as a pro was something that he dealt with a little bit at Penn State as well. But, where do they go from here at tight end? Because Zach Gentry's also dealing with a knee issue. Obviously, you have, Connor Hayward, a rookie 6th round pick in tow right now. They got somebody on the practice squad. I threw out, listen, he's on the Saints practice squad right now.
I saw this.
Kroll. Yeah, Lucas Kroll, who he played with at Pitt. I know, people were talking about his hands at times. I cannot find a single site that will show me the number of drops for anybody in college. Like, is that not something they really keep track of for college players or what?
They don't keep track of stats as close to a T as like NFL stats do.
So people were talking about his hands and fumble issues. He had 2 career fumbles, like including his time at Florida as well. And we're talking about his hands. I mean, yeah, as somebody that watched him play at Pitt, obviously saw a few drops and everything. But listen, we're really getting into way too much critiquing for what I'm talking about being the 4th tight end on a roster to maybe play 1 week because you're that desperate. I'm just looking at the level of familiarity there. And they literally need a body this week.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the familiarity with Kenny Pickett would be good, and he doesn't even need to be your pass catching tight end this week. If he can go in the run blocking, and then you can lead some of the pass catching to Cam Hayward, Connor Hayward. I was like going back and forth in my head. And then Zach Gentry. I think if Zach Gentry is going to be limited, that would be fine. You don't need Lucas Kroll to be your pass catching tight end for the week. I think that as far as Pat Fryarmuth goes, they need to like at least just take time. Don't rush him back because you saw what happened with Tua. We don't know how the severity of his concussions are, but like last year, it was towards the end of the season. It was 2 concussions within 3 weeks, and then
definitely one against Minnesota. Was the other one the Chargers? Or
I forget the games. I just remember it was like 2 in 3 weeks. Like he had one, missed they played the next game and then had another one the game after that. So the fact that he had another one, and I don't know the severity of it, but I would doubt the NFL would even want people like that to play. Seeing what happened with Tua, because that whole situation is just messed up. But they're going to take it a lot more stricter at this point. But that is something moving forward that you'd have to be concerned about. Because I mean, I don't want to talk like this already, but like you spent a 2nd round pick on this guy, and if he's going to get multiple concussions early on in his career, I mean, as a BYU fan, and I know I could relate to this BYU a lot. You might have an Austin Collie situation where great talent, but his career is going to could be limited early just because of concussions.
Yeah. I mean, you hate to have that thought pop up, but there's a person under that helmet and under that jersey as well. So,
and I mean, this is his 3rd just in the NFL. He had some in college, and I remember in high school, one of the kids on our football team, he had his 6th concussion, and they're like, I mean, he had really bad ones too, but they basically said like, if you have another one, like you could like not wake up. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, you just gonna have to pull yourself out of it. And I don't want to say Pat Fryarmuth is anywhere near that, but like, you got to remember like that could happen in these circumstances.
It was a positive sign. He was out with Craig Wolfley doing something somewhere, Settlers Ridge or something, Market District.
Okay.
Doing something. So like I'm obviously that has nothing to do with playing football, but the fact that he's not, just like
sitting in a dark room.
Like he's out and able to do stuff. I think there's a positive sign there. Again, I don't want to talk about his potential status on Sunday, but that was really him and Gentry. So the tight end room, really the only ones to talk about on the offensive side of the football. Where it gets really bad is when you take a look at the defensive side of the football with their injuries right now. Cam Sutton's already been rolled out. Hamstring injury that was kind of plaguing him last week. He was able to go. He's also dealing with a groin thing, but it's really the hamstring, I think, that's the reason he's been rolled out already for this game.
So Tomlin
rolled him out. Minkah Fitzpatrick obviously dealing with a knee thing. He played through that this week. If it got worse, I don't know, but he played through it this week. We'll see. Akella Witherspoon, he's going to work his way back this week, it sounds like. He missed the last 2 games. They're going to need him back because Levi Wallace now dealing with a concussion. Pat Fryarmuth concussion, Zach Gentry knee, Montrevious Adams with a hip. So there's a ton of contributors with it. I mean, literally every injury that they have right now is by somebody playing a good bit of football for this team right now. Mm-hmm. But really, you look at that cornerback room, man, if they can't get Akella back this week, we might be playing corner because no Cam Sutton already. Levi's got to get through concussion protocol, and that's with the ramped up concussion protocols now that they're doing in the NFL. It's going to be tough. I mean, because you look at like Terrell Edmonds working his way back from a concussion. I think it's obviously like kind of similar. Now concussions, they're like non-linear. You can wake up tomorrow and have no effects from it.
Right.
But just taking into consideration what we're going to see with the league going forward with concussions, I think Levi Wallace, at least at this point, is sitting here talking right now, very questionable to play in this game.
I think anybody with a concussion is, and I keep going back. I just keep going back to like what happened with Tua. I think the NFL and teams just look at that, and anybody with a concussion is going to be handled with probably more carefully than they would have prior to what happened with Tua, just because that was such a messed up situation that happened. Like he should not have played that second game. Anybody who watched him get up in that first one, it shouldn't have come back in the game. But yeah, I can't like speak to anybody playing, but if these people are held out, I mean, not to say that the Bills are going to be, or the Bucks are going to be like the Bills, but it could be a not so pretty week, and Tom Brady could have a field day.
Yeah, they started to find their footing offensively last week, even in a loss.
Yeah.
Got into a little bit of a shootout with Kansas City where they just weren't as able to keep up, but they were coming back towards the end. But they got Godwin back. Mike Evans returned from his 1-game suspension. Like those guys not playing was the reason that offense wasn't clicking. I think Brady still looks fine. The offensive line hasn't necessarily been as good. I mean, when you lose, your center in Nick Jensen or Ryan Jensen, you don't have to be quite as good. But yeah, I think their offense has started to hum a little bit. So
yeah, I mean,
not
last
the best
week
time for
against
Steelers to catch them.
I understand it's the Falcons, but it's not like we can really say much because we can't
Right.
really say, yeah, but we're the Steelers. Yeah, well, we suck. Tom Brady had 351 passing yards and a touchdown. So it's not going to be pretty, probably.
All right, so let's talk about. We just talked about their playmakers for Tampa. Let's talk about the Steelers playmakers who aren't making a ton of plays right now. Going back to this game on Sunday, you look at like the positives of the offense. I think the offensive line, like I said, they played okay. It's hard to, except for Mason Cole, and I know he's playing hurt right now, but he had his worst game of the season by far. But Kenny Pickett, obviously, I think that you saw enough there to be encouraged. Jalen Warren ran hard when he got the ball. 9 touches in this game. I know that game script kind of was in his favor because of Najee being banged up. They're just going to give him the rock when the game's out of hand and keep Najee on the sidelines. And then Pickens, I think that Pickett has found something there, and he's clearly becoming like his most reliable target. Listen, if he's going to be the only one that catches the football, he's going to get the football. He's going to end up having the most targets on this team the way that things are trending. But let's go back to the Deontay Johnson talk. Let's start there. I want to talk about the other receiver out of those top 3 for the Steelers as well. But let's start with Diontae Johnson. I mentioned how I think that like you could say I'm more disappointed than anybody just because like I'm his biggest fan. Like I'm his biggest supporter. There might be somebody that's like right there with me, but there's nobody above me when it comes to supporting Diontae Johnson. And what he's shown at the beginning of this year, it's not good enough. The performance has not been good enough. And listen, I don't care what he says to the media and stuff. Like that stuff goes in one ear and out the other. I don't put much stock into it. Obviously, I don't love it. I think, the comments are stupid, but I think it's just misguided frustration. And I'd be a little upset if he wasn't frustrated. I think the only problem there exists if when he looks in the mirror and when he watches himself back, he doesn't see the issues that we see as well. I think that he knows he hasn't been good enough. I think he knows the team hasn't been good enough. So from that sense, and at least I hope that's the case because I can't answer that. From that sense, I just hope that he keeps working. And I have all the faith in the world that he will find his way back to the level of play that he was at last year. But at least to start this season, he hasn't been the receiver that we're paying him to be and expected him to be. He hasn't been that leader in the receiver room on the field. He's never going to be that guy vocally, but go out and show me. He hasn't been that yet. He's made a ton of almost great catches that are literally just somehow he's not getting both feet in. But it's the ones that he's not catching that are always going to be highlighted.
I go back to that like 4th and 5.
Yeah.
Where Kenny's running to the right and he throws across his body to Diontae. And it's I understand Diontae had to jump for it. But it's one thing if I understand, but at the same time, it's one thing if it hits off your fingertips. It went straight through the palms of his hands. That like, even though you had to go up for it, he should still come down with that, in my opinion. And that's where I want to go with like, I hope that, and I know you said you're not going to put much stock into his comments. I just hope that that's not actually how he truly feels and that he thinks he's fine, like kind of like what you were saying.
Sure.
Because like I tweeted out, like physically, I will never will nowhere ever be a physical specimen that Deontay Johnson is. The only thing physically I could probably beat him in is an eating contest. And then at least with football athleticism, sure, I played high school football. That was the extent of it. I have no skill in my pinky that he has an entire body. He's got more skill in his pinky. But I still don't think that means I can't know when he should catch the football. That's and I feel like that's where his comments kind of put me off a little bit, where, and it might be misguided frustration, but I hope he truly doesn't think that he has no faults to his game, because this season that's just not the case. He's got plenty, just like everybody else on the team. There's plenty to go around, but Deontay Johnson has his fair share. And that's where I'm hoping mentally that he is not like what we're talking about and what those comments say. Because if he actually truly believes, like I understand he's like saying, like, come out here and do it. I'm like, yeah, we physically can't do it, but you can, and you're not doing it. So
he's also the only guy on the offense right now really making like substantial money, being paid to make those plays. So, I
still believe in Deontay Johnson, but and then like, he's one of the guys that can really get open whenever he wants in the football field, still, like on the Steelers roster. It's just like, and it sucks because this has been a narrative against him for years, but like, it's just the drop issues this year and making plays when you need to. It hasn't happened so far. Like,
it's also
it sucks that the one play that you were alluding to where his foot was like half of his foot was out of bounds, like whenever he landed, that would have been a great catch. That sucks. But I just keep going back to that 4th and 5 play. Like, you make that play, the drive keeps going, but instead it goes through his palms, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I remember Najee talking about it in an interview to somebody, like the media training that these guys do. I think Diontae might need to take a couple extra lessons, because he clearly does not say the right things to the media. And again, I think it's the team's 1-4. Everything sucks when you're 1-4. You got former players talking about current players in the culture that's in that locker room. You got current players lashing out at the wrong people, including the fan base. You got fans wanting, sweeping changes throughout the organization. It's not a fun place to be, and every team goes through it. It's just, for a lot of people, this is the first time we've gone through it as Steelers fans. It's the first time in the social media era for sure, which inflates everything.
Well, what's frustrating to me is listening to Tomlin make comments basically saying everything's on the table for this team. I understand that it is really hard to fire an offensive coordinator mid-season, but why should I, as a fan, really believe or think this team's going to do anything if you're going to make false promises from that standpoint? Because nothing's going to change. I mean, the Steeler way is just full of crap by now. The Steeler way probably meant something 10 years ago, but when you're only winning 3 playoff games in the last 12 seasons, you are continuously putting out the same product, especially offensively, the last 4 years, and it's been 2 different coordinators, but this one has been specifically bad. And I think making the quarterback switch, you can see now that it's mainly just the offensive coordinator at this point. We've got the quarterback that's willing to make the plays, and then Tomlin's going to say stuff like everything is on the table essentially, but nothing is going to change. I know that's going to happen. Everybody knows that's going to happen, and that I think that's why, like, the Steeler way, to me, or whatever you want to call it, is just a load of crap now. It means absolutely nothing.
I think the Steeler way is what you're talking about, though. Like, them not making those, like, stability, regardless of if it should be or not.
That's why it's a load of crap. Like, it's not helping your football team. It might have helped your football team in the past. It's not doing you any favors now.
So I definitely want to, this conversation could be the entire show, but I want to talk about Chase Claypool and Najee Harris before we go any further. So Chase Claypool was referred to by Tony Romo as non-quarterback friendly on Sunday, after he literally he's running, like, he gets a great break off the line of scrimmage. Credit to him. Beats the guy clean, but runs the route, and instead of like taking a path literally that's being given to him kind of up the seam, he just cuts himself off and basically comes to a complete stop, The defender's able to catch up to it. Pickett has to throw the ball into a very tight window, and the defender's able to make a play on the ball. That is the type of stuff that Tony Romo was talking about, where he is creating a path to make a play for the defender that didn't need to be there. He should have been able to give Pickett a window to throw into and make a play on the football that there would have been nobody around him. It would have been completely open, and he didn't. And this is just one circumstance, but it was very highlighted on Sunday because Romo said that. Then he went back and literally drew on like a teleprompter where Claypool had to run. Yeah. But he, stays on a vertical path. It's frustrating to watch this guy because you talk about specimens. This guy is. I mean, if you were creating a football player, a wide receiver specifically in a lab, it probably looks like Chase Claypool. But the way that he's playing is not the way that you would create a wide receiver in a lab. And it's not just, a small sample size at this point. We're talking about a guy that's really frustrated us with his play on the field since his rookie year. I think from a mental standpoint, like he's doing a lot of things situationally that I think he's kind of like matured. But as a football player, I don't know where this regression came from, but Romo was spot on with his analysis. And that's probably the only thing that I can say about it, because I feel like every week that we could talk about, we could go back and find so many plays where Claypool's just not doing the right thing. And
or just falls down.
That was, yeah. And, the 50-50 balls are a completely different, topic, but he should be turning those 50-50 balls into 75-25 balls.
Dude, he's 6'5",
and
he should high point the ball. He shouldn't have these like 6-foot corners beating him.
But he never extends his arms. I don't get it. That just goes back to like, why? These are things that obviously you and I are not talented enough to do on our own, but we can watch back and question, why is he not doing that? Because it's something we've seen in the past. We've seen other players do it. He has the talent to do it. What is not clicking all of a sudden with this guy? So that's where I'm at with Chase Claypool. But he's somebody I think he needed to have a huge year. We talked about that before. But at this point, I'm just looking at it like, okay, they've already paid one receiver in Diontae Johnson. You got George Pickens in line. What is Chase Claypool's future in Pittsburgh anyway?
Oh, his future is he's going to play out his contract, maybe, and then that's it. I think that's got to be it, unless you see a massive turnaround, which I would bet against it. I would bet against it. What's so funny, and I went back to check the date.
Yeah,
2 years ago today is when Chase Claypool peaked as a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Oh, was it his touchdown game against the Eagles?
It was his fourth. Yeah, 2 years ago as of recording this, so October 11th. Okay.
Yeah,
it was his fourth touchdown game against the Eagles. That was when he peaked.
Bought his jersey that day.
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of – whenever this guy got drafted, we were excited about it. We thought this guy was going to bring an element that the Steelers didn't have a receiver. And
when we lost out on Michael Pittman Jr., this was the guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and it hasn't been the same. It's not good from Chase Claypool. I just don't like his play, like how he plays. He, like you said, every physical trait that you would want a receiver to have, he pretty much has. Except he does not possess, like, I don't know if it's just ball skills, route running, literally every other skill besides physical traits. He doesn't show in a game.
Well, we knew the route running wasn't necessarily, at an elite level, but the other things are why it doesn't need to be or shouldn't need to be. But
what's crazy is like that play that we're talking about that Tony Romo pointed out, where he gets that break release, and he's running over the middle. He did that at Notre Dame a lot out of the slot.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is, I think maybe the way that he's running it in college, he can get away with it. The NFL, you have to put more effort into that. I don't know if that's the case, but it's just kind of like lazy running.
I don't want to necessarily say lazy running when referring to our next player. He's obviously hurt, man, and it's tough to watch. But second year Najee Harris has not performed, I think, the way that we would have liked. It's even tougher because the offensive line has played decent. So it's like you've seen them take a little bit of a leap this year. And you would expect, second year Najee Harris is going to take that leap along with them. And look at what he did his rookie year. He should be able to take that next step and be even better this year. I know that he's dealing with a Liz Frank injury going back to, training camp, but
I don't know
I
that
think it
that
goes
affects your
beyond that.
vision, though.
I think it goes beyond that. Yeah. And I know that the vision was an issue at Alabama. He's openly talked about it, by the way. Like his vision is probably the one area of his game that he self-critiqued and said he needs to improve on.
Najee's basically the opposite of Deontay in PR standpoints.
Yeah, true.
He's
very
willing
true.
to say when he's wrong.
But he's I don't want to say, like, by no means do I think Jaylen Warren long term is a better running back, but I think right now he's giving the Steelers more from the running back position. I understand somebody pointed this out. It was Chris Carter and Josh Tarney. I think both of them did. Is you look at not necessarily stacking the box, but safeties are coming downhill more when Najee Harris is on the field because they're anticipating a run more often than not when it's him as opposed to when it's Jaylen Warren. So that could be part of why Jaylen Warren is seeing so much more in terms of open holes and yards before contact. But just overall watching them play, Jaylen Warren to me has looked like the much better player. I think a large part of that is due to being a much healthier player at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But the vision definitely plays a role here too. I mean, I'm not like completely out on Najee Harris by any means, but if this injury is keeping him and making him look like the player that he looks like right now, there's no point in him being out there. I mean, I can appreciate him wanting to gut it out and be out there, but it's hurting the team. Not only is it just not helping them, it's actually hurting.
Yeah, and I mean that's what we were talking about earlier in the show, where it's when you're running the football like that, you're basically just wasting it down. Even if you get 1 yard, like that's a wasted down. And I think a big difference that I noticed between him and Jaylen Warren is Jaylen Warren will just kind of stick his foot in the ground and run. Najee, I don't know if it plays into the vision part where like Najee is more hesitant, and I don't know if he's just looking for different holes. But I think Jaylen Warren is just less hesitant of a runner, and he's just going to put his foot in the ground and go, which I think is helping in the run game, and that's why he's averaging like more yards per carry than Najee is. But yeah, it's disappointing to see Najee the way he is. But if he has a Liz Frank injury and he's not going to be 100%, you don't have to roll him out totally. But while he's nurturing that injury, you might as well get Jaylen Warren out there some more, because from what we've seen, he's had no reason to not be playing more. Every time he touches the football, it seems like it's a positive play.
Yeah, and Tomlin's noticed that, and he said as much. He's going to get the ball more. He's kind of ramped up his work each week. He was on the field for 53% of their plays on Sunday. And again, game got out of hand. Najee Harris, because of being hurt and everything, kept on the sidelines. But I anticipate that we're going to see him get more work. 9 touches on Sunday. I will bet you against Tampa we see in the 10 to 12 range.
Yeah. Well, 9 of those touches were not 9 of those touches. 4 of those touches were pass catching too.
Yeah.
Like he only had 5 carries. So
he's a better receiver than I think, I anticipated with his build.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like a little stocky running back, but it's effective.
Last player I want to talk about is Terrell Edmonds. Obviously wasn't able to go in this game. He's kind of been, he's always been the whipping boy, really. The black sheep of the defense, if you will. But I think his importance was really magnified in this game. And granted, there's a lot of other injuries. You're playing against the Bills. I mean, they're going to put up points regardless. But I understand that he's not like the sexy player because he's never really going to make plays on the ball. He's not going to have a bunch of turnovers. He's not going to have those splash plays. But he erases tight ends. And I think a big part of why Buffalo was able to do what they were like, that 98-yard touchdown, these other long plays, was lack of communication. Terrell Edmonds is what makes that communication go on the back end of that defense. Him and Minka, obviously. But when you are missing a piece like that on the back end, you get the results like you saw on Sunday. I think that Terrell Edmonds, we've really started to underrate him and get to the point where we don't understand how important he is to this defense. I know he came back for $2.5 million and, they were looking at other options and stuff like that, but the level of comfort on that back end, the level of communication that they have. It's why that it works for him and Minka and the rest of those guys. And not having him in this game on Sunday was a huge problem.
Yeah. And I don't think that they get beat over the top like they did several times if he's in the game. And part of that just plays into communication. Not that he's the greatest coverage guy, but just knowing the security back in the safety position with Minka and him in there instead of like Minka and Trey Norwood. Because
even if he's not the one making the play like around the ball himself, those guys are going to have better communication on the back end to have the person that's supposed to be there there.
Yeah. I mean, I forget which pass it was. It might have been a Gabriel Davis touchdown, but like Trey Norwood, he kind of crashed down as a safety when he should have stayed back. And I noticed it immediately. And I forget the corner covering him, but basically they were doing like too high safety. Trey Norwood comes down and it leaves whichever receiver wasn't wide open.
Okay. Yeah, I know Norwood and Levi Wallace were both beat on that 98-yard touchdown to start the game. And the other Davis one, I mean, I know a lot of people were like, oh, what is Minka doing? Listen, that is a ridiculous play. Like, Minka's in the right position. He even almost has the interception. Yeah. And Davis just, wrestles it away from him. Mm-hmm. But that's, again, sometimes, hey, every once in a while, the offense is going to make a play too. They made a lot of them on Sunday. But
yeah,
when it comes to Minka, those plays don't typically happen. But again, I just think we've gotten to the point where we don't really appreciate Terrell Edmonds because in 2018, we didn't think he was worth a first-round pick. If you go back and redo the 2018 draft, I'd be curious how many players most people would put in front of Terrell Edmonds from that draft class. Not just the first round, like the entire draft. I bet you he's still pretty close to being a first-round pick.
I mean, the drop-offs from, and I know we're not talking about the 2017 draft, but the drop-off in quality overall from the 2017 to 18 draft is nuts when you look at it as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, even going into like the third, fourth round, you've got guys that are still productive in the NFL right now, and you have first and second round guys from 2018 that aren't even in the league anymore.
I should do that one day, a 2018 NFL redraft, and just see.
Okay.
How many guys I'm putting in front of Terrell Edmonds. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are going to be two of them, but.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I think that's it for football. So,
wait, make a prediction for Sunday. So they're playing the Bucs.
We have to?
I think we have to. Basically,
I'll be there.
Are the Steelers going to cover? We know they're not going to win, but are they going to
cover? 7.5 now or something?
I was like 8 the last time I checked.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take the Bucs. I am actually surprised this line isn't more like around 9.5 or 10. I get that it's in Pittsburgh, and I guess that's playing into it because if it were a neutral site, it is like 10.5 then, I guess.
I wonder if more injuries, like if more guys are ruled out, that line is going to just skyrocket up.
Yeah. I do want to say though, like I can't imagine that the supporting cast is going to play as bad offensively again. Especially with everything that's going on this week already. There's so much talk. They got to try to shut out some of this noise. Even if they're not going to win this football game, you got to go out there and make some plays on Sunday. But I just think the Bucs, they have too much firepower in offense. We have no clue who's going to be playing defensively. I will take the Bucs in this one, 33-20.
Okay. I'm going to take the Bucs. I was going to say 31-20. So we're basically around the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to think if I should switch my score for the Steelers because I said 20 as well, but yeah. So we don't have the Steelers covering as of yet, but we'll see if the line changes as we get
if this game, if they're able to be competitive in this game and keep it close enough to where like game script is still favorable and everything, we can get an accurate picture and be able to evaluate Pickett, and they score a couple offensive touchdowns against what's a really good Tampa Bay defense. Again, even if they lose, I can feel pretty good about what I saw because the rest of this year, at least to me, I'm not throwing the season away. I really don't want to do that, 5 games into this. But the majority of the season is going to be about Kenny Pickett's development.
I mean, I already announced that that's basically what the rest of the season is for me. And I know it's so hard to like throw a season away on game 6, but if they go into the bye week and they're like 1-7, I know there's a chance that they could rattle off like a lot of wins in the back half of the schedule, but it's going to be pretty disheartening seeing them at 1-7.
I think we both kind of said it though, like especially after you beat Cincy in the home opener, or not the home opener, the opener, which we really didn't anticipate happening. You would have thought like those first 4 games, you know, you go 3-1, something like that, that could change the way that you're looking at the season. Obviously, TJ being injured is going to impact that. But, you know, even if they were sitting here through the first 5 games at 2-3 instead of 1-4, I might feel a little bit differently. But, you know, I can't. It's hard to be excited in terms of the outlook of the entire season. I'm really just excited to watch, you know, Pickett continue to grow and hopefully this entire young offense grow together.
Yep. Let's see his first passing touchdown on Sunday.
Yeah, hopefully. That's the one thing he's missing. We'll get it. All right, so we're going to talk about some NHL stuff, specifically with the Penguins, not necessarily so much. We talked about who we think is going to lead in a lot of categories last week, some X factors, who's the MVP going to be, blah, blah, blah. But this week, we want to talk about the NHL as a whole. Obviously, at the time of recording this, there literally is a game going on right now. Opening night for the NHL as a whole, there was like the Stockholm series or whatever in Sweden that they did 2 games with Nashville and San Jose, Nashville winning both. But how do we think the playoffs will shape up, and then give our Stanley Cup prediction? I think that we should save the Metro for last, being the best division the Penguins play in.
So we just start in the West, probably.
Yeah, I'll start with the Pacific. This is actually going to be very interesting for me at the top, between the Oilers and Flames battling this out for the top spot. I do have the Oilers in the top spot. I mean, McDavid, Draisaitl kind of speaks for itself. I do think that was a sneaky. I do think the Flames are still going to be fine. You know, they lose Gaudreau, obviously, in free agency to no fault of their own. There's literally nothing they could do. He just did not. He wanted to play where he wanted to play in the United States after not seeing his family for like 2 years due to the pandemic and everything. And then the Tkachuk trade, which kind of took everybody by storm. But they get back Huberdeau and Weeder, 2 very good players, and they've also extended both already. So I think the Flames are going to be fine. I anticipate them still being a very good team. So I have both of them. I also have the Canucks making the playoffs here, taking a little bit of a leap. I sneakily like their offseason as well. I like how they played for Bruce Boudreau once he got in there. And I think if he was their coach the entire season, they're probably a playoff team last year. So I liked what they did. And then another team that I'm expecting to take a jump, and this is slightly edging out the Knights for me. I do not have the Knights making the playoffs, by the way. I haven't seen a ton of people that don't have them there. I do not. The Ducks. I like the Ducks to make the playoffs this year. Made a little bit of a surprise move going out and getting John Klingberg, just on a 1-year deal, by the way. I think they were the fortunate ones in that no one was really handing him big money on a long-term deal. The other way that this could go is they stink and they end up being able to trade him at the deadline. But I think they're going to be decent enough. I really like Trevor Zegras. I like a lot of their young talent. I can't fully expect a bounce back from John Gibson at this point. He hasn't done it for a long enough period of time. But I think he'll be decent enough. Again, I think that that's really a product for me of that division. I don't love that division outside of the top 2 or 3.
Neither do I. I think it's a pretty mid division. But so I actually have the Flames on top, and I think that's probably just because I like Markstrom in goal more than Jack Campbell. And that's pretty much the sole reason. I think that Markstrom will win those more games. But the Oilers are my number 2 team. And then after that, I had like a real tough decision with going with either the Canucks, Vegas, or to me, the LA Kings.
Yeah. Mid playoffs last year.
So like I left the Canucks out instead of like you left Vegas out. So I actually have the Kings finishing 3rd in that division. We saw a little bit of a resurgence from Jonathan Quick last year, which was pretty cool to see. It wasn't like a stellar goal by any means, but like I think he had like around 910, 911 save percentage, which for the previous year he was like 890 something. So if they're playing better, or if he's playing better, and with how bad that division is, just like top to bottom, I think that they can make a push. And then Vegas, to me, they're not the same team they were the past, like the few years they were early on. I still think they're a solid team, but they're going to be having. I think that what's his name is out for the year. Their goalie, Lehner, yeah. And because I picked up I guess backup. He's going to be the starter in fantasy hockey. And I think that maybe like a full healthy offseason with Jack Eichel, they can get some more offense going from him. But I still think they'll be a playoff team or around a playoff team. I just don't think that they're going to be towards the top of that division like they have for the past, really since their incumbent year.
Yeah, my questions are about in net. If Robin Lehner was there, I probably would have them over the Ducks. But I can't trust whatever that goalie situation is going to be. And unfortunately, I'm never going to predict injuries, but unfortunately for them, their injury list has been long for a couple of years now. You looked at the time that Stone missed last year, the Pacioretty missed last year.
Oh, dude, Stone's made it.
They've had injuries. Yeah, and Pacioretty they traded. He's with Carolina now. I don't know. That's a hard team to trust for me going into the season. But obviously, like you mentioned, a full season of Jack Eichel. Going back to the Kings prediction, though, what I do like about their offseason was getting Kevin Fiala. Now, I don't know if I love the contract that he got there, but big addition. He was a really good player from Minnesota. They just couldn't afford to keep him around. So
it's Logan Thompson is the Knights goalie.
Never heard of him.
Started right now. Neither did I, but I picked him up on fantasy.
All right, going to the Central with the Stanley Cup, reigning Stanley Cup champions, Colorado Avalanche. I do have them winning that division. I've seen a lot of, not a lot of, Dom Luchessen's model from The Athletic has the Minnesota Wild winning that division by 1 point over the Avalanche this year.
I still have the Avs winning that division.
Yeah.
I have
the
Avs. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, all you right. Go. It's fine.
I have the Avs winning that division. I do like the Wild, though. I have them second, slightly over the Predators, who I have at 3. But I want to talk about the Predators very briefly, just because you say Saros. To me, if we were doing like award predictions on this as well, I think he's one of the 3 guys that I would have in that Vezina conversation. Mm-hmm. I've always been a fan of his, especially, like he started to. It was a very similar situation to like that Vasilevsky Bishop, or a lot of goalie situations where you see like all of a sudden, like that one of the goalies is on the back end of his career, and that the backup's probably better at this point. But like Pekka Rinne's history with Nashville, they weren't just going to completely throw him to the side and have Saros take over the net. But Saros has been there for a little bit, and once that fully became his net, he's been, a top 3 to 5 goalie in the league pretty consistently. So I got them, and then this was tough between the Stars and Blues for me for that last spot. I ended up going with the Stars.
Okay, so we have a little bit of difference. Our top 3 is pretty much the same. I have the Avs, Wild, and Preds. Okay. And then I actually have the Blues. So we have, from the Western Conference, we have 3 different teams because I don't have the Ducks or the Canucks or the Stars. So
yeah. I like that. Obviously, at the top, it's hard to not be the same. So
yeah. Well, and I feel like the West more so than the East is more top heavy, where you can kind of predict who's going to be like the top like 1 or 2 teams in each division. But then after that, it's kind of just like a crapshoot for who's getting into those like wild cards and those third slots in the divisions.
So as we shift to the Atlantic, I will say maybe my biggest surprise is going to be from this division. I know that we're going to do the Metro last, but let me just give a little bit of a tease here that I have 5 teams of the 8 being from the Atlantic that make the playoffs.
Okay.
So I got the Panthers actually winning that over the Lightning. And the Leafs are kind of in that conversation too, obviously. I think any one of those 3 could win that division. I've seen several people pick all 3 of them. I'm giving the Panthers the edge here. I mentioned that trade with the Flames earlier, which I like for both sides. Like, it's very rare that you look at a trade and think, oh, both these teams got better. They got what they needed. I think Florida needed some Matthew Tkachuk, but I also think Calgary was fine with their return. and both teams will be okay. I'm going to pick the Panthers to win this division. And it's actually over the Leafs because the Leafs, I don't trust the net enough to pick them to win the division. We know what they
Matt
have.
Murray and Ilya Samsonov.
Yeah. And I know it's just one game. We saw the Lightning lose to the Rangers here on opening night. My biggest question for them is going to be on special teams. Honestly, we know what they have in net. They're very good at 5v5. The Rangers on the opposite side of that are very good on special teams and pretty mid at 5v5. So I actually have this division being Panthers, Leafs, Lightning as the top three. Now here's where I said I'm going to get a little bit spicy.
Okay.
They're going to take a massive leap this year. I got the Senators making the playoffs.
Wow. Okay.
But I also have the Bruins making the playoffs.
Okay,
5 teams.
I mean, I figured if you're having 5 teams, I figured the Bruins are going to be one of them.
Yeah.
But the Senators making the playoffs, that's, I mean, I know they're a really young team that has talent, but that's, I would classify that as a hot take because I don't think I've ever seen it. I've seen like many people saying that. So, but I dig it. I mean, I like the boldness. I'll be honest, I didn't put them in there, but part of me was like flirting with the idea of like, do I want to say like Detroit is like a fringe like wild card team? Because I think in a couple years they're going to be good too.
Yeah, I like their offseason as well. I think I look at what Ottawa did. I mean, I'm not the biggest Cam Talbot fan in the world, but I mean, he's been there for a while. I think he's solid enough.
He's serviceable. That's pretty much it.
Drake Batherson had a fantastic year last year. They got Alex DeBrincat in a trade. They brought in Claude Giroux. I mean, I think they had a sneaky, really good offseason. Obviously, Josh Norris is there. Brady Tkachuk's there. On the back end, you got a building block in Thomas Chabot. But that to me is where the questions are going to be, is defensively, did they do enough? I think there's been talk to them. There was talk to them the entire time about adding a top 4 defenseman. And I was trying to will a Brian Dumoulin trade into existence. They wouldn't do it. But I liked what they did enough to say I think they take that leap.
So do you have them ahead of Boston?
Yeah, I have them as the 4 and Boston as the 5.
All right. I mean, I respect it. So I actually have Toronto winning that division.
Okay.
And I do not trust the goaltending, but I kind of feel like we're going to get a scenario where Toronto is going to be similar to the 2016 Penguins, where it doesn't really matter who is in net. As long as they can keep you in the game, you're going to outscore everybody. So I have Toronto winning that division. I have Florida coming in second. Like you said, that trade with Calgary, it's not many times where you say like they both won the trade, but it seems like they did. They both got some good pieces in that trade.
They both just seem super happy. Like, and the fan bases, like it's very rare where you're like, oh yeah, I could see that trade for both sides. I think both teams got what they needed. Normally you're like, why did my team do this?
Exactly. I have Tampa finishing third, and then I only have 4 teams I have 4 from each division. And I have Boston finishing in that 4th spot.
So you would have the Red Wings at 5 though. You like the Red Wings more than Ottawa.
I mean, maybe it's just because I think they're a more sexy team in terms of. Hold on, pause. I think they're a more sexy team in terms of like their skills, the skill set on the team. But Ottawa might turn into the better team. But I think especially when I look at Detroit's offense and the capabilities that I could see happening there, I could see them winning.
Andrew Copp. Love that.
Yeah, I could see them winning games just solely based off their offense. So that's why I was like flirting with the idea, but I don't think they're there yet. But give it like 2 years, and I think they're going to be a playoff team.
Full year of Jacob Verana, who is really good for them.
Yeah,
I didn't like that trade for Washington when they made it.
No,
they brought in Billy Husso. Again, I looked at the defense, and besides Mo, I don't see a lot that I like here.
Right. That's why I said the offense is sexy to me. Not the team as a whole yet. But all right, the Metro. I'll start this one off since
Go ahead.
All right. So I have the Hurricanes winning this division. I feel like that's a pretty common opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They've got something in net with Freddie Anderson that I didn't think they were going to get, and I think that just top to bottom, that team is a Stanley Cup contender. So it's hard for me to pick any other team to win the division besides them. In second, I have our Pittsburgh Penguins. I think that Tristan Jarry is going to have a really good year. I think that they're going to get some improved offense from multiple players. I think that you're going to see an uptick in play from certain guys like a Kapanen, a Zucker, because they're going to be in the roles that we think they should be in. Like Kapanen is no longer that fringe top six guy that it needs to be playing up to that level. Like I think that he'll thrive a little bit more, knowing like I'm the third line winger, and I think that they'll put themselves in a situation. And I think the thing that I love about the team this offseason was the changes on defense. I think the defense is going to be really good this year. Although it's interesting. So like I know they had to bring down Ty Smith because he wouldn't be on waivers, but POJ would. So how does that work? Like, is POJ going to play, or are they? Yeah, like they.
Yeah, I think he has to at least play in the opener. I've kind of been like following along, trying to figure out how they can get Smith back up here. I think that they can do it, maybe even the next day, and it would be fine.
Okay.
But a POJ is going to be on that third pairing for sure in the opener. I think the question is because they had him, Ruda, and Ruido all kind of like rotating their last practice. So I'm expecting it to be POJ and Ruda.
I mean, I knew the only reason POJ didn't get set down is because he wouldn't have cleared waivers. That's really it.
Yeah, they tried to trade him to literally every team. If you believe
it's a little and if it's true, it's a little different when the guy's just sitting there and you can just grab him instead of having to give up assets for him. So I understand the move. Interesting to see how that plays out. But I have the Penguins finishing second, and then I have the Rangers finishing third. I think that they're basically just going to ride on the coattails of Shesterkin again. Because like you said, they're good on like power play and penalty kill, but 5-on-5, they're kind of just like a mid hockey team. Like they've got some good players, but we saw in our series with them that 5-on-5, they're not impressive. They were literally just having Shesterkin in net. But I think as far as the season goes, they'll finish third, and I have the Capitals as the wild card team.
So the reason that I have 5 from the other division, only 3 from the Metro, is I do not have the Capitals. I do have the same 3. The difference is I have New York as 2, Pittsburgh at 3 in the division. I think there was a lot of fluky stuff, by the way, that happened with the Rangers last year. I don't necessarily think it's completely sustainable. Like Kreider's not going to score 52 goals again. Shesterkin is going to take a step back, I would think. But even so, I still expect that he'll be, in the Vezina hunt, even with him taking a little bit of a step back. I am not necessarily a fan of losing Kopp and Strome and replacing it with Vinny Trocheck. But I think that they can basically still play.
He's as good as Malkin, though.
Yeah, exactly. But I think they can basically still play the exact same style of hockey as they did last year. I think it's fair to expect another leap from Keandre Miller. Adam Fox is one of the best back there. Mika Zibanejad maybe had his best game that I've watched tonight. And he's still 29 years old. Panarin's there. Kreider's still going to be a really good player. I don't think he's just scored 52 goals like he did last year. But they're just going to be so good on special teams. Carolina, I don't know why I started with the number 2 team. I think it's just because of us that being the difference, 2 and 3.
Right.
But Carolina is the team that we both have at the top there. Again, I think the only way that that's not the case is the goaltending, if it falters a little bit. But to me, top to bottom, they got the best roster in the Metro. But the Penguins, to me, are still a playoff team at this point, even, despite them being the oldest team in the league. Like you mentioned, short term, I think they got better on the back end. They're going to be able to transition the puck better this year than we saw the last couple of years. I think they're going to be able to defend the net front presence better than they have the last couple of years. And beyond that, I look at a team that's pretty similar. And if you were looking at ways that the team needed to improve, sure, I don't think that they necessarily got much more scoring punch in their bottom 6. Like, I think we would have liked to have seen that added. But, I think bringing Danton Heinen back was pretty big. I think now that you mentioned Kasperi Kapanen, and now that we know he's going to be in that third line role, the expectations will lower. He shouldn't be making as much as he is, but assuming he's just going to be able to sit in that third line role and play that type of game, because he is better defensively, I think, than we give him credit for. He should be killing penalties. I don't dislike this hockey team at all. The one thing that I would change is literally in the fourth line. I would not have Josh Archibald up here. I would be playing Drew O'Connor. If I get one,
Same.
Ty Smith should also be, but we understand that situation.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. All right. So we had a little bit of disparity there, so that's good. We didn't have the same teams. But Stanley Cup Finals.
Who's let me ask you this before we do that.
Okay.
Who is like the one team, if you didn't say them, if you don't have them in the playoffs already, that you think like could be how I have like the Senators, like just really surprise people this year? Even if you didn't pick them to make the playoffs yourselves, like you could see it happening.
I mean, I know you picked them, but like Canucks.
Okay.
To me,
yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're as bad as like they're going to finish as low as probably a lot of people would predict the Senators to finish, and like you're having them make the playoffs. But like, I think the Canucks are a team that have kind of like underperformed based off expectations and haven't really made the playoffs, and I think they could make the team. Dallas Stars as well, but they're kind of like that fringe team. It's basically picking between Blues and Stars for me for that wild card spot. So I would say the Canucks in that division.
Yeah, I think a lot of the thing with the Canucks is probably just like again anticipating another leap from Thatcher Demko. But like you look at that roster, to me it looks like a playoff team, especially in that division. The one, like, I guess their biggest offseason addition is probably Ilya Mikheyev coming over from Toronto. They really didn't do much outside of that. I mean, other than, extending JT Miller, which is obviously nice to see. But actually, like, outside additions, that was really the only one.
Yeah.
But man, I think the big thing when I look at them is like, what version of Brock Besser are they getting? Because he's been up and down.
Yeah, it's been. He's someone that I mean I keep relating to fantasy hockey, but like I didn't pick him because I think he's too cold at times. He just goes on cold streaks where he should be scoring, but he's not. So
really good shot. I mean, it looked like he was going to be, their franchise player.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's probably like their 7th best player on that roster, something like that.
Probably something like that.
I mean, listen, you got, obviously I just mentioned, JT Miller coming off the season that he had, Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, Bo Horvat, probably still above him. Connor Garland, would you say him or Brock Besser at this point?
I mean, the player I'd prefer to have is Connor Garland.
Yeah.
So that answers that question for you. There you
go. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that his stock has kind of fallen here, but if he can get back to being that player, that's the type of thing that's going to propel them to be in that playoff spot I have him in. So,
yeah. All right, now Stanley Cup Final.
So it's kind of, I mean, it's, I feel like a cliche thing to do to just say the Avalanche are the best team going into this season. I know they won it last year, but here's the thing: is we've seen repeats happen. I don't want to say frequently, but like we saw the Penguins do it, we saw Tampa do it. Granted, 2 shortened seasons. Like we've seen it happen now. It's really that third year where you start to see the wear and tear of the team in the playoffs where they just completely run out of gas. They obviously lost some pieces, as any Stanley Cup team is going to do. Nazem Kadri. Oh, didn't even mention Kadri's with the Flames as well. So that's big for them too.
Except for the 2016 Penguins. They didn't really lose a lot.
Yeah. So I got the Avs winning the Cup over the Florida Panthers.
All right. So I'm going to say that the Oilers finally break the seal.
Wow.
And they're going to get there. But I don't have them. Okay. I don't have them winning. I have them losing to Tampa Bay.
Oh my God.
Listen, I don't want to pick Tampa Bay. Believe me, I would love to pick. I mean, as a homer, I'd love to pick the Penguins. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I would love to pick Florida or Carolina or someone like that. But when I just think about it objectively, and I'm like, they have the best goalie. They have such a well-rounded team. In the playoff scenario, it is so hard for. I mean, they got back to the Stanley Cup Final last year. Sure, the Avalanche won, but like the East didn't really put up much of an effort against them.
Mhm.
I just think that they're going to get back again, and part of it is because they're just so well-rounded, and they've got the goaltending to make a push in the playoffs because that matters more than almost anything in the playoffs is goaltending. And as Penguins fans, past few seasons, we can attest to that. That goaltending is a huge part of winning. And so, yeah, I have Edmonton making it, but I have Tampa Bay unfortunately winning it.
They also get Braden Point back, who wasn't able to play for them throughout most of the playoffs last year.
So I know it's 2 shortened seasons. So like the 2020 and 2021 season. But is 3 and 4, is that like a dynasty?
I think so.
Yeah.
Especially because they played in the cup in the other one.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that's stupid. If they get back, even if they get back there and lose again, I mean, that's just insane. Like,
here's the way I know my pick isn't that bad, because it's hard to argue against it.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
that's why I wanted to ask you if part of you, because of your reasoning starting out going in net, how much of you thinks like the second team that you would pick would be the Rangers because it's Shesterkin?
So I do like the Rangers in net in a playoff scenario, but again, I just don't think 5-on-5 they're good enough to win in playoff hockey because we know how playoff hockey
Power plays are
goes.
scarce.
Yeah. If I were to pick a runner up in the East, I would say probably Carolina.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I do like Florida too. I mean, don't get me wrong. Any of these teams could make it, but I'm predicting that Tampa's going to do it.
My question is going to be, by the time the playoffs roll around, is it Bobrovsky or Spencer Knight?
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Like, you got Bob on that huge like $10 million a year deal, but then you're giving Spencer Knight a deal as well. I mean, obviously not that big, but you got 2 goalies under serious contracts.
Yeah.
Which one's going to be your number one guy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just happy that we're talking about hockey again because the Steelers haven't brought me much joy. Hopefully the Penguins will.
Agreed.
So, anything else?
No. Penguins play on Thursday, so let's go Pens.
Also, breaking the fourth wall, it is very late here at the time of recording this for me. So, if I've seemed like I'm lower on energy as the episode has gone on, that is why. It's about midnight here on the East Coast. But yeah, hey, let us know what you guys think about this and literally anything else that we've talked about through this episode. Anything as it pertains to the Steelers. We know you guys are fired up too. You're not having a fun time watching the Pittsburgh Steelers. But hey, we can all join together on one thing, and that is with the GoFundMes that we've been talking about. We'll continue to talk about. The links will be in the bio of this. We can't thank you guys enough for the support that you've given us through the first 4 years of doing the Rockin' Around the 412 mission. We've raised over $20,000 doing so. 11,000 of that and some change was last year, by far the biggest year that we've had. 13 different families, 30 different kids within those families. It was amazing. I mean, you guys, if you've been watching the show dating back to last year, saw what my basement looked like around Christmas time. I wasn't able to move from my desk chair. I couldn't do a full spin without hitting a box. So I hope that it's like that again this year. Every single penny that gets donated to this thing will go to purchasing gifts for the children, as well as a gift card to provide the holiday meal for the family. And we already know one family that we're going to be helping out. I graduated with Dalton Keene, who tragically passed away. Everybody I think at this point knows about the incident at Acrisure Stadium. The game between the Steelers and Jets. Just so happened that I graduated with him. And his daughter, he leaves behind a 2-year-old daughter, Isla, who obviously, for reasons stated, needs help with her future. So a GoFundMe was created. Tyler informed us at the beginning of the show it's around $27,000. that has been raised up to this point. That's fantastic because this thing's only been going for about a week or so. So please continue to support that. We are going to continue to support that and bring it up. We're also going to make sure that Isla is taken care of this Christmas through our Rockin' Around the 412 mission. And we can't thank you guys enough for helping to contribute to that. So the link to that stuff will be in the bio of this. It will also be on our Twitter at Around the 412, or you can just go to GoFundMe and search Rockin' Around the 412 for that. And for Isla, I believe it's called Isla Teens Future. Is the name of the GoFundMe. Yep. So you can type that in. That's ISLA, Isla. I know, very unique. I remember when he first told me that was the name, I thought I was hearing him wrong. I was like, what did you just say? He had to tell me 3 times, I think, before I got what he was saying, because I was like, that's not a name. But very unique name, very beautiful little girl, and I can't wait to help provide Christmas for her and you guys to do so. For that, I don't know if I mentioned, we are going to be giving away several prizes to those who donate. So anybody who donates is going to be eligible to win those. I don't have any of that stuff yet. I actually started looking around today. But if you guys have any ideas, like stuff that you're like, man, I would love to have a shot at winning this, throw it in the comments or tweet at us. If I can find it, I will definitely make sure to get it because you guys are what makes this whole thing happen. So obviously I want to get stuff that you guys want. So
for sure.
But other than that, like and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this, whether that's on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, leave us a like, leave us a comment, as I mentioned, about anything that we've talked about. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, whatever that is, wherever, stay up to date with us on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, all that good stuff to get your 60-second clips throughout the week. Other than that, for Smitty, for Tyler, this has been another episode of Around the 412. We will see you guys next week after we knock off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bye-bye.